2. We'll do it live this time. What's up?
It was meant to be this way.
Yeah.
You knew it. I knew it. Everyone knew it.
Welcome in, everyone. Live edition of Hoge Jahns. The Bears have a head coach. We are here to discuss. We were in the middle of recording a podcast earlier this morning, which was more about Dan Quinn, if we're being honest. And right in the middle of that podcast, the texts and tweets and all kinds of stuff started rolling in. And it was Matt Eberflus. So, quite frankly, we deserved it, Johnsy. We were sitting there bragging about how we got a good night's sleep last night, and how good we were feeling, and now we're on like our third or fourth cup of coffee, trying to get through the last few hours.
I just filled up, ready to go. We're still going to bring up some of the things we talked about on that now forever lost episode of Hoge Jahns. I still think there's some important points to bring up, especially the ones that our guest had made about Dan Quinn, but. We are now on to the Matt Eberflus era. Eberflus. That flows right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yes, it is Eberflus, by the way, everyone, which I've already heard like 3 sports radio callers screw up. I'm sure that'll continue for as long as he is the head coach. Welcome in. Follow us on Twitter at Adam Hoge, at Adam Johns. Plenty of reaction and coverage already on Twitter and as well on theathletic.com/HoganJahns from Johnsy. I have a quick reaction up on NBCSportsChicago.com, and there is plenty more to come there the rest of the day. You can also find our merchandise on AviShirts.com, and you already know if you're watching this live, you should be subscribed to our YouTube channel. And hit the notification button to find out when we go live. And if you're listening to this later as a podcast, you could have watched this live had you been subscribed to YouTube and available to watch. So we appreciate everyone here, though. We will take some questions from listeners, viewers, as we did the other day when the Bears hired Ryan Poles. So we'll knock some of those out here in a little bit, too. But, Johnsy, just give me your initial reaction here.
He comes with, like, his recommendation list. Is good, especially if you got this Bears nostalgic side to you. Chris Ballard, I know you perked up whenever that name is said. He was pounding the table for the guy. Rod Marinelli is his primary NFL influence, his mentor. So that alone, if you're into the Bears nostalgic side of things, that's a positive. But of course, with every first-time head coach, there's going to be concerns about building a coaching staff, game management, timeouts, all that stuff comes into play.
Yeah, it's just different. You don't know it until you do it. When you go this route with the first-time head coach, so very different discussion than what we were having this morning about Dan Quinn in the episode that didn't even get finished because the Matt Eberflus news broke, and a lot of that discussion was okay. Dan Quinn's done this. He made mistakes. We were running through his mistakes. Some of his offensive coordinator hires were mistakes. And then he had a really good one named Kyle Shanahan. That was his first time, his first OC hire. And so there's really, you don't know how it's going to go until it happens. And there are plenty of examples of first-time head coaches working out as well.
Lovie Smith.
Lovie Smith. I mean, they didn't win a Super Bowl, but he proved to be able to do the job relatively quickly. And I do put stock in recommendations. By the way, I see that comment, Nolan. We got live comments going in. He said, does Adam Hoge have the best hair in Chicago now that Ryan Pace is gone?
Oh, do you? I don't know.
No.
Probably not.
It's definitely not Kevin Fishbane. Needs to have hair.
Probably not.
Wow, that was just
shots fired.
That was a tough shot. Just sideswipe Fishbane for no reason. He's not even here.
He's probably watching though.
Wow. I mean, Kevin can jump in if he wants to. If he is watching, I'd be happy to talk to him. The hair won't really be there though. You're right. Well, I don't even remember what I was talking about before.
Well, let's run down the timeline of things. All right. So the Bears' schedule for this week, this is the way it went. It was Tuesday, Ryan Poles' second interview, Jim Caldwell's second interview. Wednesday, They had Matt Eberflus' second interview, and Monty Osenfort's. He is the Titans director of player personnel. His second interview was set for Wednesday. I think everything changed when George McCaskey happened to pick up Ryan Poles at the airport on Monday night.
Yep.
I mean, that itself is a strong indication of how McCaskey feels about this GM candidate. Tuesday morning, Ryan Poles gets the job. He interviews Jim Caldwell that afternoon. Also added that afternoon is Dan Quinn to the Bears interview list for Wednesday. Monty Osenfort is no longer on that list for obvious reasons. So Wednesday happens. You have Eberflus in the morning. You have Quinn in the afternoon into the early evening. And then you have a break. Come Thursday morning, first you have the Nathaniel Hackett news out of Denver that he is now the Broncos' new head coach. And then you have the Eberflus news breaking while we were recording a podcast. But that's kind of the timeline of things. And if you want to go back further in the timeline, like Eberflus interviewed on the 19th. That was his first interview, January 19th. 2 days later, he interviewed on the 17th. 2 days later, on the 19th, the Bears asked him back for a second interview. 2 days after that, on the 21st, is Ryan Poles' first interview. So if you're into the logistics of things, the timeline of things, that's how it played out for the Bears, if you can understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get picky and nitpick the process, it would maybe sound a little bit better had Matt Eberflus been invited back for a second interview, like the same day that Ryan Poles interviewed, or maybe the day after. And then maybe you could point to, then maybe Ryan Poles like Matt Eberflus.
He was already a finalist before Poles was interviewed.
Yeah, so that part, doesn't look great. But, look, I do believe that this was not a situation
Correct.
where he was forced on the Ryan Poles. I think it was maybe a coincidence that the search committee had Eberflus had a good interview, right? And just like Ryan Poles did, just like everyone who ever gets hired.
And this isn't Jonathan Baker's commenting. This isn't a meatball take. This is the logistics of things, of how they played out by date for the Chicago Bears, unless he's talking about the other commenter.
Yeah, sometimes it gets confusing because you realize that they're actually talking to each other and not for us. But you know what, Johns? I thought that reporting, that timeline, was very meatballish of you. How dare you report facts of when people interviewed? What are you doing?
When they came in. But to hit on what you were talking about, or getting to before I interrupted, of course, head coaching candidates came up in a conversation with Ryan Poles. Did they not? I mean, how do they not? Of course, teams are going to ask these GM candidates about their list of head coaching candidates. It is like probably the most important conversation they have. And clearly some stars aligned at some point between the Bears and Ryan Poles.
And there was one change made that I think is very important as you lay out the timeline. Eberflus' second interview was originally scheduled for Monday, and that got pushed back to Wednesday because the general manager was in the process of being put in place. So, if they had interviewed Eberflus before Ryan Poles got hired, for a second time, like the second that would have been a little weird and hard to understand. But look, there's some real connections here.
Absolutely.
Between Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus. So let's lay out some of that for you. Okay, first of all, Chris Ballard, the Colts GM, worked in Kansas City before he went there, worked with Ryan Poles. They know each other well. Chris Ballard, I know for a fact, was pushing for Matt Eberflus, was giving him strong recommendations. And so that carried some weight. There's one connection. Another one is, and I love this, so Trace Armstrong happens to be their agent, right? Trace Armstrong, and we've been talking about a couple times. A lot of people want Trace Armstrong to be the Bears' top guy. Well, maybe he is right now while holding on to his, I don't know, is it $1 billion business at this point, the way he's closing some of these contracts? His agency is the top coaching and executive agency right now in football. It's a very impressive agency. Trace Armstrong has built this thing up, and it's one of the reasons why I keep pointing out, why would he leave that to come take over the Bears? Well, He's basically served as the director of football operations here for the Bears without having to leave his business.
Absolutely. He's getting paid either way, right?
Yeah, he's getting his cut.
So if you're not following, Matt Nagy, Trace Armstrong client out. Ryan Poles, Matt Eberflus, Trace Armstrong clients in for the Chicago Bears.
Yes. And another more subtle connection, but the Colts linebackers coach, who obviously works right under Eberflus, linebackers coach for the defense coordinator, right, is the brother of Mike Berganzi, who is the assistant general manager in Kansas City right now. So there's another connection there between coworkers and family, and it all intertwines at some point. So I think there's enough there that this isn't just like Ryan Pace calling up Sean Payton and being like, hey, they're trying to get me to hire John Fox. What do you think about him? And, of course, Sean Payton knows John Fox and says some nice things. And, it's different than that. But time will tell here, right? Results will matter. Stories will end up coming out later. And we'll see on this. In terms of the candidate, I'll get back to what I got sidetracked before, which is that a lot of people I respect in football. I don't know Matt Eberflus, okay? And I don't know Ryan Poles at this point. We'll get to know these guys. But a lot of people I respect in football have really good things to say about Matt Eberflus. And like I just did a live Under Center podcast with Olin Kreutz. And when Olin Kreutz says that Rod Marinelli's word matters, so if Rod Marinelli's going back or backing up and saying really good things about Eberflus as a coach, Olin Kreutz is listening to that because he respects what Rod Marinelli has to say. Like, that's a voice that carries weight, that has the credibility that matters. So there are some connections there to the past, the Lovie Smith era, and a lot of that has to do with Matt Eberflus coaching with Rod Marinelli in Dallas. And so I think there's some good things there.
Yeah, Eberflus was Marinelli's linebackers coach for several years. And it just always strikes me how it's certain things just come back. As the story goes, Rod Marinelli told Phil Emery that his choice, if he had to make it, would be Bruce Arians over Mark Trestman. Now, Rod Marinelli was never going to stay, but he sat in those interviews of Arians and Trestman, and Arians was his pick back then, as the story goes. So just always interesting how things always come around with Chicago Bears.
Well, and I get some of the comments coming in here that every coach that gets hired and every GM that gets hired, I see Kevin Fishbane in the comments too. Again, Kevin, if you want to jump in here, Kent will get you the link.
Send it, Kent.
But no, it's a completely fair point that, like, anytime you hire anyone, the Chicago Bears are going to put a story out and says all these people from Kansas City have great things to say about Ryan Poles. Well, of course they do. So I get that. So I want to be very clear. One of the distinctions I'm making here, I didn't come out here and spit out all these nice comments that were said about Ryan Poles. What I'm saying is people I respect personally, that like Rod Marinelli's voice. If Rod Marinelli is going to vouch or Chris Ballard's going to vouch for this guy, that carries some weight to me. I'm just talking about personally. I don't know all these people talking about Ryan Poles. I don't know his high school coach or his, I don't know who else people have talked to.
Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan.
Yeah, Matt Ryan. Okay, but even I don't know Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan seems like a nice guy. It seems like his word should carry some weight, but I don't know him personally. What I'm saying is there are people in this situation with Matt Eberflus that talk very, very highly of him, and that does carry weight. I also like, because you and I covered this and are very familiar with it, we hear that Matt Eberflus uses a lot of that same language and principles when we talk about culture and accountability, running to the football. What did we see with the Bears? We saw with Lovie Smith, we saw a defense that always gang tackled. Everybody running full speed on every single play to make the play, whether it was made or not. The effort was there, and they got loafs. That was the term.
Yep.
And Matt Eberflus uses that
graded
term.
by it.
Yes.
Their loafing was graded.
That is a term that Eberflus uses. Got it from Rod Marinelli, the loafs. The reason why that matters, well, you guys remember that 2013 Week 17 game against the Packers when that ball was sitting on the ground and nobody went after it? Like, the culture immediately changed when those guys left. Some of the players were still the same, but the coaches were different. The accountability changed. So from that standpoint, if this is what this guy stands for and he's going to bring some of that back to Chicago, I think it's a good hire. Now, we can get into all the offensive stuff, sure, and we will. But from that standpoint, I think there are things to be positive about.
Absolutely. 100%. It's that word nostalgic again. And you can't help but wonder what George McCaskey felt when he was hearing all these things. And again, I want to stress, this was not George McCaskey's hire. Can we make that apparent? And I know there's going to be skepticism because this is, of the 17 coaches in Bears history, this is like George McCaskey's fifth. That's a bad percentage. 17 coaches in Bears history. This is the fifth under George McCaskey, and that just started in 2011. So a lot of reasons for skepticism, but I'm sure he liked hearing some of the things that he heard back in the day with Lovie Smith. And I still vividly remember the emotion that McCaskey showed when Lovie Smith was fired. You remember that press conference in the Muggs Auditorium?
Yes, I do.
Yes, and he was talking about how he was talking about his emotions, how tears were shed. You could hear that emotion in his voice inflection right there in the bottom of the stairs of the Muggs Auditorium. So just thinking about all those things, that nostalgic feel. And it's not even that old, but that Lovie Smith winning culture, or that type of culture, seems to be coming back to Hallis Hall now.
By the way, the official word is Kevin Fishbane's too busy to join us.
No, he's not.
Wow.
He's not.
Wow.
Anyway, who cares?
I mean, we got people here in the comments saying he should be the offensive coordinator. People want Kevin. People want the fish man, the fish dad, and he's letting you guys down. Let's just let the record show.
I think one commenter said he was loafing, which is a great use of current topics. Very topical.
Yeah. And someone else says, where's our friend? Oh, he's busy diagramming plays. He's now communicating to us in the comments. Jeez. Someone asked where Patrick Finley is.
Where's our friend Patrick Finley?
I don't know. All right. Now, completely fair concerns. You are now hiring a first-time head coach again. You are hiring a defensive head coach. What does that mean for Justin Fields? Who the hell is going to be the OC? And that's a big question. Because it's hard to thread the needle because you hire an OC who has a lot of success right away with Justin Fields, probably going to be a head coaching candidate soon. You hire a OC that doesn't work out, then you have a revolving door of OCs coming in and out of the building, and that the Bears have lived that already many, many times. So you don't want that either. So this is a big question. I don't necessarily have the answer as we record this live just a couple hours after the hire is made, but it's probably the number one thing on deck right now that they got to figure out.
Well, if you are returning to Lovey era dynamics, Adam, we know how that played out. Coordinator after coordinator for Jay Cutler.
Mm-hmm.
From him yelling to, back at Mike Martz to who else was in here? Adam Gase came later with John Fox, but the many names who ran the Bears offense, you want to avoid that. Now, it happens with defensive-minded coaches. You do see that around the league, but let's go to, how about Dan Quinn, for example, since we talked about him at length this morning. He had a great hire immediately in Kyle Shanahan. Didn't work out well in his first year, but by his second, Kyle Shanahan was a head coaching candidate because of the success of that offense, and we see what Kyle Shanahan is doing now, but he had a great offensive staff. Matt LaFleur, Mike LaFleur, Mike McDaniel. They were all on Dan Quinn's first coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball. But things change. When Shanahan was out, the two guys that came in to replace him, they didn't pan out. And then before you knew it, Dan Quinn was in Dallas looking for jobs.
Yeah, no, it's true. Now there was, I think Albert Breer put out there that there's going to be a good look at the Kyle Shanahan tree. You know what that means?
Your guy Mike McDaniel.
Our guy Mike McDaniel. It's not just my guy. I have brought you into this.
It's fine.
I don't know why.
Well, I'm on the pod, so I have to be.
Yes, you. Yeah, who's my guy is now your guy.
But that would be a first-time play caller, would it not be?
Yes. Well, and that would be the only reason why you would hire him. You would even have the opportunity to hire him because otherwise he's already the offensive coordinator.
True.
The 49ers.
Well, it should be noted that Kyle Shanahan's availability for Dan Quinn in 2015 involved him getting out of his contract in Cleveland prior to that.
Yeah.
And Cleveland was just a mess that year. I think, wasn't Shanahan part of that staff that drafted Johnny Football?
Yeah, I believe
Johnny
he
Manziel?
was. I believe he was. So, yeah, and you know, now you can't block assistants anymore from interviewing for coordinator jobs. That's a big key. But if you're already a coordinator, whether you have play calling responsibilities or not, I think that doesn't matter. I think that you still have to get permission, and they can block you. So we'll see. By the way, did you see that Deadspin story on Mike McDaniel?
No bueno.
Oh man. Yikes. It was just a terribly done thing. It wasn't it kind of was supposed to be a hit piece, I think, but it was just like really poorly researched and not done well. So maybe a name to keep in mind or not. Regardless, the Bears have to get that hire right. I mean, they really have to get all these hires right.
And you know what, Adam? Like, continue to get it right.
Yeah.
Like, develop your own little tree here in some sense.
Right. Like, whoever you hire as your quarterback's coach under the OC, you should be prepared for that guy to step up and be the offense coordinator. If the offense coordinator has enough success to get another job.
Ask him to bring a buddy. And I know that term, like, look, ask him to bring a highly regarded younger colleague that could run the quarterback's room in a sense, because you're going to need some type of contingency plan if this coordinator works out well with Justin Fields. Because if Adam Gase can get a job for Jay Cutler's 92.3 passer rating in 2014, right, that's the right year, then whoever succeeds with Justin Fields can get a job elsewhere too. So just keep that in mind, Matt Eberflus.
Yeah. Someone else in the comments put out Joe Brady's name.
Trace Armstrong tree.
There you go. Maybe. That didn't really go so well in Carolina, though.
Yeah, but Sam Darnold was his quarterback.
Yeah. Pep Hamilton's name has come up.
Pep Hamilton's name always comes up with the Bears.
It's true. But, you know, there's the connection there to Indy, I think. So we'll see. But that's a completely fair concern at this point. But let me just say, I am not against the idea of having a defensive head coach. You know, I go back to the criteria that I laid out at the start of this. First and foremost, has to be a good leader, has to be respected by players, has to have an identity for his program. Okay, from everyone we've talked to from Indy, and I would encourage people to go back and listen to our Stephen Holder episode from a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Morocco Brown, but we also talked about Matt Eberflus in that episode. The returns, the early word, and again, this is not just from people who always have nice things to say. Like, this is stuff, behind-the-scenes conversations that I think we have had with people more off the record where they're going to tell you the truth. And everything I've been told about Matt Eberflus from that standpoint is very, very positive. And I think that's one of the things we're going to hear from the Bears in terms of identity, accountability, the things he believes in, the principles he believes in, philosophies as a coach. I think that's going to check out at the top. Now, number 2 on my list was the OC, the what you're going to do with Justin Fields. And that's a big question mark here. And then the third thing was keeping the defense intact. Well, I think you're going to see the defense be okay because they're hiring a defensive head coach who's had a lot of success. So, to find a candidate that really hits all three of those is really, really hard to do, because in one way you're either going offense or defense. If you get the OC hire right, this can work.
And here's the thing: if you get the quarterback right, it's definitely going to work. Now, I'm not saying by any means is Justin Fields shown enough that he's a sure thing at this point, but the signs are there. He was a first-round pick. The talent is there. The uncoachable traits are there. So if you're right at quarterback, and again, you have Ryan Pace to thank for that, it's okay to have some changes at coordinator. You don't want a lot of them, but I think you get my point.
Yeah.
Can I just point out a couple differences between him and Matt Nagy as well, because they're both first-year head coaches?
Sure. Well, it's just I'm sure you have I'm just kind of sick of that. Like just people complaining about that, because Lovie Smith was the first time head coach.
But here's to your point though. Literally, you just made it. So let's strengthen it. That Matt Eberflus's voice was the strongest on defense. Matt Nagy's voice was never the strongest in offense.
Good point.
In Kansas City, Matt Eberflus had autonomy in Kansas City, and I also think it's a positive that he didn't actually come up in that Frank Reich, Chris Ballard kind of way. He was hired by Josh McDaniels, who later bailed on the Colts and stuck with the Patriots. But then he won them over year after year after year with the top 10 defense. If you look at Football Outsiders rankings, DVOA, top 10 every year, or 11 one year, but he won them over to the point where Chris Ballard is banging on the table for him to get a head coaching job in his old town of Chicago. So I think that's just a notable difference in terms of that leader of men characteristic, and in terms of accountability, identity, that some of those things have been established, in a sense, by that Colts defense that was run by Eberflus.
Yeah, I think that's...
You thought I was going elsewhere. You were about to get annoyed.
No, I didn't. I was getting annoyed at the fact that you even had to address it, because it's just... I don't know. You can't just be mad at first-time head coaches. I think...
I'm not. No,
I know you're not. I'm talking about the people that... some people are just dismissing this altogether because they didn't want to see another first-time head coach. And I get the concerns, but if you really look at the candidates that they interviewed as first-time head coaches, I think Matt Eberflus is by far the most qualified. To your point, Nathaniel Hackett getting the Denver Broncos job, he wasn't the biggest offensive voice in Green Bay.
Wasn't a play caller.
Wasn't a play caller. So, that's a big difference. So yeah, I just no one knows how this thing's going to work out, but just don't dismiss it, because he's 51 years old. He's been in the league for a long time. He's learned under some really, really good coaches, and most of these, a lot of his former players will tell you that he's made for this to be a head coach.
I like that he's coached in Dallas too. And the spotlight's always on the Cowboys. You got pressure from ownership. It's just a unique environment, because I think he
knows how to lose home playoff games.
That too. But it's just some unique experiences to have, especially coming to this town. I mean, this town will eat you alive. Chicago will. And we've seen it spit out players. It's being able to handle some of that. I hate the word adversity because I feel like it's overused, but some of that scrutiny, should benefit them.
All right, let's. We should take some questions from our viewers before we get out of here. And so, Kent, if you can drop the link into the comments and line those things up. If you want to jump in and ask us a question, that link is now in the comments, and you can click on that, and then Kent will drop you in here as you come in. But I think one of the other things we have to talk about, Johns, in the meantime, is anticipating a scheme change here defensively. I think that this is not going to be that big of a deal because, for one, teams are nickel so much right now anyway that most defenses at this point are hybrid. However, there's still something you said for the base defense you learn. Like, these guys are going to have to learn a new defense. And while it's a good thing that your top guys, in my opinion, Roquan Smith, Robert Quinn, Khalil Mack, those guys transcend scheme. Like, they're going to be just fine. In fact, Robert Quinn's probably having a party right now, celebrating the fact that he's going to be able to put his hand on the ground more and just rush upfield.
Khalil Mack is in Egypt.
Okay. I did see that on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm not making that up. He's
No.
visiting the pyramids.
So he's probably not too concerned about who his new head coach is. He's in Egypt. But
I'm
Jalen
sidejacking
Johnson.
you left and right.
Jalen Johnson's fine. Like, he's going to be okay in whatever defense he's playing in. Now, I think some of the other examples are where you might have some changes. Eddie Goldman's a nose tackle. You know, is
Or
that
you're looking for
somebody?
that 3 technique.
Yeah, is that somebody you move on from? Bilal Nichols, I think, has already shown he can move around the defensive line. Akeem Hicks can do that if they were to bring him back. What about Travis Gibson, though? A guy that really came on strong in his second year, went from being a 5 technique in college to a true 3-4 outside linebacker. Can he put his hand down on the ground now? It's kind of like halfway in between the two positions he's played. I don't know that yet. So I think there's going to be some things like that come up that we may or may not see these players work out in a new scheme.
I would say Roquan Smith, if you're making predictions, is going to be a superstar in this defense.
Well, that's a good point, because Darius Leonard's already a superstar, and he's going to be the Darius Leonard. I mean, he's already the Darius Leonard of this defense, but now he's going to be in that defense, in that scheme. So
We have Eric standing by.
let's do it.
He's
Eric,
gonna
what's
be
up,
in
man?
that defense, in that scheme. So
We have Eric standing by.
All right, we're going to have to
Let's
get
do it.
Eric out.
Eric, what's up, man?
Audio.
What's up, guys?
so
First of all,
We have
I'll
Eric
show you-
standing
So appreciate the T-shirt there. No idea what was going on with the echo, but either you have to have your speakers off, or I think there's an echo cancellation on your StreamYard settings that you have to check for everyone else jumping in.
We'll
So,
bring you back, Eric.
Yeah, well, if you can figure that out, we will bring you back in, and we'll see who else is let's go to Kyle now. Kyle, what's up?
Hey guys, how's it going?
What's
Good.
up, Kyle?
Thanks for having me on. So my question, it's about the OC. I know you guys talked about it a little bit, but with a defensive head coach and, Justin Fields and the fact that an OC you think would have play calling autonomy, you would think that this is a highly sought after gig. So we kind of would have the choice of the lot. So would you guys, if you had choice, would you want someone with like head coaching experience like Caldwell, like the young stud like Kafka, who might leave to be a head coach if the offense takes off next season? Do you think like someone like Jim Caldwell would be inclined to stay, not just jump at any head coaching gig that opens up immediately?
Yeah, that Jim Caldwell idea has been brought up more than once. I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, though. Like, he was the first finalist interviewed on Tuesday, and he is 67 years old. I just cannot see him returning to the NFL to be an offensive coordinator. He's already been out of the league for a couple of years. I mean, sure, it makes sense. Maybe Bill Polian can do some convincing there, but I don't know. Hoge, do you feel any differently?
No, I feel like Jim Caldwell would be stronger as a quarterback coach type guy rather than the coordinator, if that makes sense, and actually calling the plays. And for part of the reason that Kyle just brought up, I mean, this should be a very highly sought after job, and I think that there are a number of very highly qualified OCs out there right now that do not have play calling responsibilities. That I think there's a pool there that you can pick from, as long as they can, contractually make it happen. Like that, and that's, I think, where Mike Kafka comes in. So I'd probably rather go the route of somebody that's maybe a little bit more up and coming than than Jim Caldwell is at this point. But if you want to hire Jim Caldwell as a quarterback's coach, fine.
You do see interesting moves around the league as things play out. I think, like, if I'm Matt Eberflus, I want to try to find a young up-and-comer. But at the same time, look at John Harbaugh. I mean, he had Jim Caldwell as his offensive coordinator, won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. Then Mark Chessman went through there. I mean, these defensive-minded coaches, or in Harbaugh's case, a special teams coordinator, they go through different guys, and different coaches are available for different reasons at different times. We'll see how it plays out. I just hope it's not this awful revolving door that we saw play out with Jay Cutler. Now, part of that could just be Jay Cutler. Maybe Justin Fields is a bit different. Maybe he's a bit more transcendent. Maybe he's a bit more, for lack of a better way of putting it, a bit more coachable. But we'll see.
Yeah, and one thing, like someone just pointed out in the comments, like how does Jim Caldwell potentially go from a head coaching candidate to a quarterback's coach?
Well, also, don't forget what he also said. Are you smoking?
I'm not smoking. I am not. And he said, "Are you smoking? Smoking?"
Yes.
I'm not. Are you smoking? I'm just wondering.
Are you?
It's all about demand. It's not like he's some huge hot head coaching candidate. He interviewed with the Jaguars, and his buddy Bill Polian made him a finalist here in Chicago. Like, it's not like he has a long list of teams that are lined up to sign him, even as an OC. And I don't even know the last time he called plays.
A couple
So,
of years ago.
yeah. All right, let's bring in Eric.
I'm laughing about the Jaguars.
Yeah.
They're awful search.
The Jaguars
Bring 'em
are
in.
just hilarious right now, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. That was the other place where Matt Eberflus was a finalist. All right, let's bring in Eric again. We'll try again with Eric here. What's up, man?
Eric, you got us?
How we doing? Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
You got me?
We got you.
Can you hear me? I got you. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. First of all, yeah. We got the Hoge Jahns t-shirt going on.
Love it.
I'm still getting weird feedback. Cut me out, guys. This is strange.
Okay. All right. Appreciate you trying, Eric. I think you may be listening on YouTube and trying to talk to us on StreamYard, and that's why there's a weird delay. But let's go to David now.
Hey guys, how you guys doing? Big
What's
fan
up,
of the
Dave?
show.
Thanks, man.
This is something that you guys just kind of alluded to earlier. You know, I think the narrative around Bill Polian, being involved in hiring a general manager in Chicago was the fact that once he found the GM, that he was not going to be involved in the head coaching, decision making. And I guess a lot of Bears fans were really mad about how that played out in 2015 when they hired Ryan Pace. They really, I guess Ernie Accorsi really had the whole organization and Ernie Accorsi were really intrigued in bringing John Fox, whether Ryan Pace wanted it to happen or not. Now, Matt Eberflus comes from Indianapolis. Is there a clear connection is there a clear connection between Bill Polian and Matt Eberflus in that Bill Polian actually was maybe more involved in making this, was he actually slightly involved in making this head coaching decision?
Well, he definitely had input in the call me your early lists. But my understanding is by the end of it, I mean, he's not even at Hallis Hall, guys, right now. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not. Ryan Poles ran these final 3 interviews. They were his decisions to make, his questions to ask, all that stuff. I get the concerns about using an advisor again, but I think at some point it just stopped. I really do. And you can believe me if you want or not, but the guy's not at Hallis Hall.
Well,
Ryan Poles is.
Yeah, I hope that's what happened because that was the mistake the Bears made last time. And they had to bring in an advisor. Like we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I talked about it before they even fired Pace and Nagy. Who was going to be the one doing the hiring, right? Like you had to bring in somebody like Bill Polian. Otherwise, this was going to come down to George and Ted again. So I had no problem with them bringing somebody in. But the problem is, once you hire your football guy, then that's your new football guy.
Get out of the
So,
way.
thanks, Bill. Appreciate all your insight. You've had your look at all of these head coaching candidates that they interviewed at the same time. Here's all the information. You hand it over to the new football guy, Ryan Poles, and you let him do his job. And from the sounds of it, I think they got that right this time. Hope they got that right this time.
You know, I get the skepticism because the Bears warrant it. Again, 5th head coach under George McCaskey, 2nd advisor. I understand it. 3rd general manager. It's just how things have played out for him. You can look at the timeline and see that Eberflus was a finalist before Poles was even interviewed. But I'm sure it's going to come out probably tomorrow when we meet Eberflus and Poles for the first time that Poles was high on Eberflus, that his name was discussed in their initial interview, and I'm sure the Bears liked what they heard. And again, as Adam here pointed out, Hoge, that is, things got pushed back, so Poles can meet with him again.
I also like that he met with him in person yesterday. And then after that, he talked to somebody else.
Dan Quinn.
Then he talked to Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn was the hottest name on the coaching circuit this year. 6 interview requests. He's turning down the Jaguars. He doesn't need the attention. Something to consider.
It's interesting, though, he's not considering the Giants anymore, where he's supposedly a finalist.
Yeah.
But maybe that means he truly wanted the Bears job, didn't get it, and he's going to be picky.
I do want to bring up something. So on our earlier podcast, we interviewed Jeff Schultz, who covers the Falcons and many other teams in Atlanta, and he pointed out that in Atlanta, Quinn actually had to sign off on Thomas Dimitroff. That Quinn actually had control over the 53, and that he played a huge role in personnel. I'm just speculating here, but you almost wonder if some of those things came up here, and you have a first-time GM. I'm sure Ryan Poles, as much as he liked Dan Quinn, didn't want to relinquish the power over the 53.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not so sure Dan Quinn was making those demands again, though.
You never know.
Yeah, possible. All right, let's at least get one more in, maybe 2. Yash. What's up, Yash?
Hey, Hoge Jahns. Coming at you all the way from Mumbai, India, where it's like 1:20 in the morning, but I'm
Come
so
on,
excited.
this is awesome. This is awesome.
So thank you guys for all that you do. My question was that I was wondering that now, so that we're shifting to a 4-3, what happens to the linebackers? I know Roquan will be fine as the Mike. Can Ogletree play the will? Do we keep Brevathan? Can he play on the Sam? We just let go of Igbuniwe, so do we get someone in free agency? Do we draft someone? Just my thoughts on that. And thank you, Bet On.
Thanks for the question. I think I personally think that Roquan Smith, I get that there's going to be obsession over the Mike and the Will here, but that weak side linebacker, which is so important to that scheme, Roquan Smith can handle Lance Briggs' role. Why can't he?
I mean, he can handle the middle too.
He can do everything.
That's part of what they're going to have to figure out is do you put him in the middle, or Darius Leonard plays the Will, in Indianapolis. But it's I think that's the biggest thing about switching back to a 4-3 that you have to work out is those linebackers. Absolutely. Who do you bring in? Regardless of what Danny Trevathan can do, I just feel like it's kind of
I think it's
the end of his career physically.
The page is turning.
Yeah, so I think you have to go. So there's going to be some new faces there, absolutely, and it's probably the biggest need, honestly, as you look at that. Well, I don't want to say biggest need because they still got to upgrade the secondary. They still need another corner, definitely, and the safety could be upgraded as well. But that linebacker spot in terms of transitioning the defense, where do you put Roquan? Who else do you put around him will be a huge focus here and something we talk a lot about on this podcast in the next couple of months.
Well, if we're just sticking to Tampa 2 principles, I think it was Tony Dungy who once said that you need that 3 technique. You need that weak side linebacker, and you need that strong safety, that rangy safety. And we know that he had it in Tampa with Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, and John Lynch. All Hall of Famers. And we saw what the Bears did with Brian Urlacher was in the middle, but Levy kind of expanded that, being able to drop him over the middle of the field there. But you had it with Lance Briggs. Mike Brown was here for a bit. Tommy Harris. You can see where this is going if that's where the Bears want to go. I mean, who knows? Maybe Eberflus has different ideas, but I think we know where this is going.
Yeah, and one thing I'd be careful about is, I have concerns like other people do about Khalil Mack's health going forward. How much time Robert Quinn really has left in his career. But for this defense to work, you need to win with 4. You need to rush with 4 and not have to blitz a whole lot. And that's kind of how the system works. So it's one thing that Matt Eberflus had in Indy was DeForest Buckner. But he didn't necessarily have huge sack guys on the outside rushing the quarterback. In fact, I think he only had one double-digit sack guy in 4 years. So the point I'm making on that one is you got Robert Quinn and you got Khalil Mack. Like, that could go a long way to making this thing work relatively quickly.
Just think of Julius Peppers in this defense.
Yeah.
We have Chris.
Chris is next. All right. Yeah, let's go to Chris.
Oh, me. Hi.
What's up, Chris?
Not much. How are you guys doing?
Very good, man. What's going on?
Hey, I had a question. There was a lot of stuff about like the Bears and what their identity was, during the last couple of years. It seems to me that like with the Eberflus hire, them being a defensive coordinator, it seems like the Bears are trying to answer that question. Like, this is who we are and this is who we've always been. That to me seems to be like a really good thing going for the future. What do you guys think about that? You think they'll also run the ball more because of that? Thanks.
I don't have a problem with that as long as the quarterback works out, right? Because like it's true that you had a lot of success with that type of identity before they tried to drastically change it, but they never had the quarterback that could get them over the hump. So I think that's where it comes back to Justin Fields. If he's really that guy, then yeah, you don't need to necessarily be the high-flying Kansas City Chiefs on offense. But otherwise, there's still something to be said about the fact that if you really look at the numbers of teams playing in the Super Bowls, their offenses are usually in the top 5 or top 10 at least. So you still better figure it out offensively if you want this thing to work.
And if you just want to compare it to the Colts, I mean, sure, Jonathan Taylor was an MVP candidate, best running back in the league. But then look at the quarterback. I take Justin Fields over Carson Wentz. Sure, the development has to come along, and there's a lot for Fields to show, prove, learn, all that stuff. But if you ask me right now, like on paper, I'm taking Justin Fields over Carson Wentz. Absolutely.
I don't think, is that something that's actually being debated?
I don't know. Well, he's from there.
I'm not even sure Carson Wentz is going to be back in Indy for another year. Oh.
Good point.
Yeah,
I think we got one more here.
All right. Ben, what's up?
What's going on, boys? You got me?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we kind of already talked about the defensive changes that are going to be happening. With Eberflus coming in, he's obviously going to want to run his style, his defense. What do you guys think that means for Sean Desai? Obviously, it probably spells the end of him. I don't know if they're going to be able to make it work if he gets moved to maybe a new role. Or do you think maybe he has a future with another team in the league? I'm just kind of curious your guys' thoughts on what you think of Desai, because I don't think he did an awful job given what he had to work with this year on defense, the COVID issues, the awful secondary. So yeah, just curious of you guys' thoughts, and thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you on Sean Desai. If you talk to folks around the league, they were impressed by what he did, given what he had, and on the field every single week, especially with the injuries and COVID situations, whatnot. But I think professionally, it's probably time for him to move on. if you're just speaking about him and what he wants to do, he's been here since Mark Trestman. He has survived John Fox. He has survived Matt Nagy. I think the best step for his career, the next step in his career, is finding another opportunity elsewhere. I do know that he was interviewing for the defensive coordinator job in Seattle. I don't know where that stands at this very moment, but I think he's thought highly enough around the league that he'll have opportunities. And I think at this point, even though he's come up through the Bears organization, starting with Mark Trestman, it's probably best for him to find other opportunities elsewhere.
Well, and that's what's interesting, depending on what opportunities he has, and depending on if Matt Eberflus would even be interested in keeping Sean Desai around. I mean, Sean Desai would almost certainly then have to run his defense. But that's where things do get a little interesting, because remember, when Sean Desai got here, they were running something closer to this defense.
It's true.
And one of the great things about Sean Desai that's been so impressive over the years is how he has been through different schemes, learned different things, been through all those different head coaches, and picked up a lot of things along the way. That being said, I think he really picked up a lot for Vic Fangio. And really, that's been well documented at this point, that if it comes down to his preference, he's probably running that style defense. And if
what if Vic Fangio gets that Jaguars job?
Yeah, he probably won't, but I guess it's possible. But that's to your point. I think he'll have opportunities to continue to stay in that defense and have success in other places to continue his coaching career. And I'm not sure he's necessary, unless he really doesn't want to move his family. There's always other considerations. He may not want to move his family. He may be okay.
Me that coaches are people too.
Yeah, he may want to see it through with some of these players that he has relationships with. He may be open to going back to some of the defensive stuff he learned before. But what I would say is I'd say it's unlikely he sticks around, but I wouldn't completely rule it out because of his history here.
Secondary coach?
That's what I find it hard to believe is unless Matt Eberflus is really, really impressed with Sean Desai, just what he did this year, don't you think Matt Eberflus is going to want to bring in a coordinator? And also Desai would almost surely have to retain play calling. I can't see him taking a step back,
right,
staying here and then not calling the plays. And at this point, we don't know.
Passing game coordinator.
Yeah.
I don't know. You see these titles expand for different reasons.
But he could go do that. Don't you feel like Brandon Staley would hire him in L.A., or wherever Vic Fangio ends up, he would hire him? If he has to take a step back, he could take a step back elsewhere. I don't know. And that's going to be one of the first questions to Matt Eberflus. How are you going to run your defense? Who's calling the plays? Are you going to call the plays? Are you going to let somebody else come in and do it? How's that going to work?
It's got to be somebody he trusts.
Yeah. Maybe that connection with who's the linebackers coach in Indy? Maybe he's ready for, Berganzi. He's got the connection to Ryan Poles. Maybe that's something they bring in to be the DC.
It's an easy connection, isn't it? The brothers, the assistant GM of the Chiefs, and it's just, that's how the NFL works sometimes. People roll their eyes at it, but it does. That's how it works.
Yeah. So I think another question is Chris Tabor. Special teams, you can keep running special teams the same way. And I would not mess with that. If Tabor's here and willing to stay and Matt Eberflus is willing to keep him around, I would keep Chris Tabor.
How many interviews has he had?
Well, we know he's interviewed in Carolina. I can't imagine the Bears would grant him position to talk to the Packers. Did they officially fire their special teams coordinator yet?
Well, maybe he's out of contract.
Who? Tabor?
Tabor.
Oh, I thought it was out there that he wasn't. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Nagy got 5 years. Usually coordinators get 4.
Yeah. We'll have to figure that out. But if possible, I would keep Chris Tabor, given what's been going on there.
A fellow special teams coordinator sticking up for another.
That's right.
But I'm with you.
One of the local writers, Adam Hoge, excuse me, I don't know how to pronounce the last name.
All right, good stuff. Hey, this thing's over.
Okay, I think we got another podcast coming this week.
Oh, man. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, we'll probably have to do one after the press conference. Which we don't, technically this hire is not official yet. We don't know when the press conference is. I think it'd probably be tomorrow, but.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe Eberflus, he's driving back from Indy or something.
Yeah.
Like, these guys leave town.
Maybe he's listening to us on I-65 right now. Sorry about that. The I-65 drive's bad enough.
Oh, yeah. Right. Gonna do it next month.
Yep.
Mr. Eberflus going back to Indianapolis for the Combine.
I hope so. I hope there's a real Combine. We'll see.
Same.
All right. Follow us on Twitter at Adam Hoge, at Adam Johns. Read me at NBCSportsChicago.com. Johnsy's on The Athletic, theathletic.com/Hoge Jahns. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. Again, if you're listening to this as a podcast, find us on YouTube. Subscribe to the Hoge Jahns channel. Appreciate everybody who has done that. Thanks for everyone jumping in with questions today. Always good stuff. We'll continue to keep trying to do that here throughout the offseason. And check out the merch. ObviousShirts.com. I'm telling you, those beanies, we got the winter gear up there for you.
Oh, we needed it yesterday.
Oh, man, yes. I'm telling you, that one hat that has the lining in it, it's the one that, if you look, there's 2 winter hats up there. The one that does not have the little ball pom-pom thing on the top, that's the one that has the fleece inlining. Super warm. Super warm. Although I could also just live without having -8-degree days.
That'd help, too.
That'd be nice. But, all right, we're out of here. We'll probably talk to you after the press conference.
See you then. See ya.